The rain had just stopped, Leah VYing the suburban streets of Crestwood glistening under a gray March sky. Puddles shimmered like broken mirrors along the sidewalks, reflecting the manicured lawns and cookie-cutter houses that lined Willow Lane. The air smelled of damp earth and freshly cut grass, a scent that clung to 15-year-old Marcus Tate as he trudged home from Crestwood High. His sneakers squished with every step, the cuffs of his jeans dark with water. A faded green hoodie hung loose over his frame, the drawstrings pulled tight to shield his face from the lingering drizzle. Earbuds dangled from his ears, pumping a steady beat of lo-fi hip-hopus armor against the quiet of the neighborhood. Marcus wasn't in a hurry. He never was. His mother, Lena, always told him, "Take your time, son. The world moves too fast to chase it." He'd nod, half listening, but her words stuck. So he walked slow, deliberate, his backpack slung over one shoulder, heavy with textbooks and a soggy algebra worksheet he'd meant to finish at lunch. The sidewalk stretched ahead, flanked by identical porches and hedges trimmed with military precision. Somewhere nearby, a sprinkler hissed, defiant against the wet afternoon. He didn't hear the car at first. The music drowned it out, but then the rhythm shifted, a low crunch of tires on wet gravel, creeping closer. Marcus tugged an earbud free and glanced over his shoulder. A black sedan rolled up beside him, its tinted windows catching the faint light. The driver's side slid down, revealing a man in a pressed polo shirt, the collar stiff as cardboard. His hair was salt and pepper, his jaw set like he'd been carved from stone. On the door, a silver logo gleamed. Crestwood Homeowners Association. Not police. Worse. Neighborhood watchdogs with too much time and too little sense. "Hey, kid," the man called, his voice clipped like he was issuing a parking ticket. "What are you doing out here?" Marcus stopped, turning just enough to meet the man's eyes. "Walking home, sir." The man leaned out, elbows resting on the window frame. His gaze swept over Marcus' hoodie, jeans, the faint shadow of stubble on a face too young for it. "Home, huh? Where's that?" "Up the street," Marcus said, keeping it vague. He didn't like the way the man's eyes narrowed, like he was soul VYing a puzzle Marcus didn't want to be part of. "In this neighborhood?" The man's tone sharpened, disbelief threading through it. "You live here?" Marcus felt the familiar twist in his gut. He'd been here before, not with this guy, but with others. The pause, the calculation, the unspoken question that always came when his skin didn't match their expectations. "Yeah," he said, firmer now. "Edo." The man's lips thinned. "You got ID? Something to prove it." "I don't need to prove anything to you," Marcus said, his voice steady but tight. He wasn't loud. He wasn't rude. Just clear. Lena had taught him that to stand tall, don't bend, but don't break. The man's face hardened, a flush creeping up his neck. "You're going to need to prove it to someone." He reached for his phone, fingers tapping the screen with purpose. Marcus sighed and turned to keep walking. He made it maybe 15 feet when the sedan gunned past him, cutting him off at the corner. The man didn't get out this time, just leaned out, barking into his phone. "Yeah, suspicious kid. Loitering, won't identify himself. You need to send someone now." Marcus kept his pace even, eyes forward. He didn't run. Running made it worse. But his heart thudded louder than the bass in his ears. Minutes later, the sirens started sharp, piercing, slicing through the damp air. 2 police cruisers rolled up, lights flashing red and blue across the wet pavement. Officers stepped out, boots heavy on the asphalt. One was older, grizzled, with a hand resting on his belt. The other was younger, twitchy, scanning the street like he expected a shootout. "There he is," the man shouted from his sedan, pointing like Marcus was a trophy. "That's the one." Marcus stopped, palms up, instinctive. "I'm just walking home," he said, voice low, controlled. "I didn't do anything." The older officer stepped closer. "We got a call about suspicious active EY tie. Need to see some ID, son." "I'm not doing anything suspicious," Marcus said. "I live here." "Where?" the officer pressed. Marcus hesitated. Telling them felt like GIVYing in, like admitting he had to justify his existence. "I don't want to say." "Wrong answer," The younger cop snapped, MOVYing behind him. Hands where I can see him. They were already up. Marcus turned slow, deliberate. Sir, I didn't. Turn around. The older one cut in. Marcus froze, then felt the cold bite of metal on his wrists. The cuffs clicked shut, tight and unyielding. For your safety, the officer muttered, but the words rang hollow. Marcus stared at the puddle beneath his feet, his reflection fractured in the water. He hadn't given him a reason. They took him anyway. Lena Tate didn't hear about her son's arrest from the police. No call, no knock, no official notice. It came from Mrs. Carver, the widow next door who'd lived in Crestwood since the houses were just blueprints. She'd seen it all from her kitchen window. Marcus, the sedan, the cruisers. Her voice cracked over the phone, frail but urgent. Lena, they took him. Right off the street like he was some thug. Your boy didn't even fight. Lena's breath caught, a sharp hitch that stopped her mid-sip of tea. The mug slipped from her hands, shattering on the hardwood floor. She didn't flinch at the sound. Her mind was already racing, a storm of fear and fury held back by a dam of focus. She grabbed her coat, her keys, her phone. No tears. Not yet. Tears were for later, when she had him back. The Crestwood police station was a squat brick building, its fluorescent lights buzzing like a hive. Lena stormed in, her heels clicking against the linoleum, her braids pulled tight in a bun that matched the steel in her spine. She was a nurse, used to emergencies, but this was different. This was her son. I'm here for Marcus Tate, she said to the desk sergeant, her voice a blade wrapped in calm. The sergeant's stocky man with a buzz cut looked up, eyebrows lifting. Tate, let me check. He shuffled papers, too slow, too casual. Lena's fingers tightened around her purse strap. Finally, he nodded toward a hallway. He's in holding. You'll need to wait. I'm not waiting, she said, stepping past the desk. Take me to him. Now. The sergeant blinked, startled by the authority in her tone, but he didn't argue. He led her down a narrow corridor to a small room with a VYUing window. Through the glass, she saw Marcus slumped in a plastic chair, hoodie soaked, wrists red where the cuffs had been. His eyes were down, his breathing shallow. He looked smaller than he was, a boy swallowed by a system that didn't care. Lena pushed the door open and stepped inside. Marcus looked up, relief flickering in his eyes, but it was buried under something he VY or shame, exhaustion, a quiet rage he didn't know how to name. She sat across from him, silent at first, her hands folded tight in her lap. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't need to. The folder on the table told her enough. Suspected loitering. Refused identification. Displayed passive resistance. Passive resistance, she whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. She snatched the folder, scanning the words. They turned her son into a suspect for walking home. For existing. A young Officer Ruiz. Her badge read hovered near the door, shifting on her feet. He didn't do anything violent, she said, almost offensive. But the HOA called. Said he didn't belong. We had to check it out. Lena's head snapped up, eyes locking on Ruiz. The HOA? You arrested my son because some busybody with a clipboard told you to. Ruiz flushed, glancing away. It's protocol, ma'am. Protocol. Lena cut in, standing. You handcuffed a child over protocol. Her voice didn't rise, but it carried a weight that made the room feel smaller. She turned back to Marcus. We're Leah VYing. Now. He's already been released, Ruiz said quickly. Just paperwork left. Lena didn't respond. She guided Marcus up, her arm around his shoulders, and walked him out. The rain had started again, soft but steady, drumming against the roof of her car as they drove home. Neither spoke. The silence was thick, full of questions neither wanted to ask yet. By morning, the story had spread. Not through news channels, but through the quiet veins of Crestwood. Neighbors whispering over fences, kids texting in group chats, parents murmuring at the school drop-off line. Lena didn't care about the gossip. She cared about the black sedan parked across the street, same as yesterday, engine off, watching. She stood on her porch, coffee in hand, Her nurse's scrubs traded for a blazer and slacks. Her eyes tracked the sedan, memorizing its plates. She didn't wave. She didn't glare. She just watched, her phone already recording. This wasn't about confrontation, not yet. This was about EVY Denke. Lena wasn't just a mother. She was a paralegal turned CIVYL rights attorney, a career she'd built after years of night classes and double shifts. She'd seen the system from both sides, its cracks, its biases, its quiet cruelties. And now it had touched her son. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She planned. By noon, a formal request hit the police department's inbox, signed with her name and bar number. She demanded every HOA-related report from the past year, call logs, dispatch records, officer notes. No exceptions. Hours later, a subpoena landed at the Crestwood HOA office, ordering them to turn over emails, meeting minutes, patrol schedules. She didn't stop there. She filed a complaint with the state attorney general's office, alleging discriminatory enforcement and CIVYL rights violations. The machine was MOVYing now, and she was the one turning the gears. The EVY Denke came fast, a flood of paper and pixels that painted a damning picture. Call after call, month after month, flagged suspicious indie VY duels, almost always teenagers, almost always black or brown. Unfamiliar male near park. Loitering by mailbox. Doesn't appear to belong. No crimes. No asuncio Marcos. He was the spark, but the tinder had been piling up for years. Lena built a case like a surgeon stitching a wound, precise, methodical, unyielding. She cross-referenced police reports with HOA complaints, synced timestamps with grainy security footage. She found names: Gerald Haynes, the man in the sedan, a retired accountant turned HOA VYC president with a habit of calling in concerns. Diane Voss, the board chair, whose emails dripped with coded language about maintaining community standards. A dozen others, smaller players in a game they didn't realize they'd lost. Then the families came forward. A father whose daughter was tailed by an HOA patrol for riding her bike too slow. A mother whose son was questioned for carrying a skateboard. A grandmother who watched her grandson get stopped for wearing a backpack on a Sunday. One by one, they called Lena, their voices raw with the same pain she'd felt. "We thought it was just us," they said. "We didn't know who to tell." She listened. She documented. She fought. The Crestwood City Council meeting was standing room only, the chamber packed with restless bodies and humming tension. Reporters lined the back wall, cameras rolling. Residents sat shoulder to shoulder, some clutching flyers, others whispering theories. At the front, Lena stood alone, a tablet in her hands, her dark eyes steady as stone. "Good evening," she began, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. The screen behind her flickered on, showing a still from a security camera. Marcus, hands up, rain streaking his face as an officer loomed over him. "This is my son," she said. 15 years old. Walking home from school. This is what your HOA called a threat." The room hushed. She tapped the tablet. In a chart appeared hundreds of HOA complaints, 85 fan tram targeting kids of color. This is what profiling looks like when you dress it up as VY Giants. Another tap, and a VY Deo played. Gerald Haynes, leaning out of his sedan, voice cold. "Follow him. He doesn't fit here." "That boy," Lena said, pausing the clip, "is my son. And he's not a criminal. The crime is what you've let fester, fear masquerading as order." The crowd erupted, gasps, murmurs, a few shouts. A woman in the front row stood, tears streaming down her face. "They did it to my girl too," she cried. Others joined her, voices overlapping, a chorus of anger and relief. Lena didn't flinch. She waited, letting the sound build, then raised a hand. Silence fell. "I'm not here for applause," she said. "I'm here for accountability." She laid out the EVY densidates, names, patterns. She named Gerald, Diane, the officers who'd acted without cause. "This stops now," she finished. "Not tomorrow. Not next week. Now." The room exploded again, applause crashing like thunder. Lena stepped back, her face unreadable. She didn't need their cheers. She needed results. Within days, the fallout began. Gerald Haynes resigned, his public excuse a vague family emergency. Diane Voss followed, her statement drowned out by leaked emails showing her orchestrating patrols like a general. The police suspended 2 officers, including the one who'd cuffed Marcus, pending investigation. But Lena wasn't done. She filed a class action lawsuit for 13 families, each with a story that mirrored Marcus's. The courtroom was packed when the case opened, the air thick with anticipation. Lena stood before the judge, her voice steady as she recounted the testimonies. A boy detained for jogging, a girl interrogated for sitting on her own porch, Marcus cuffed for walking. The HOA's lawyer stammered through a defense community's safety, resident concerns, but it crumbled under the weight of the EVY Denke. The ruling came swift and sharp. Guilty of discriminatory practices, liable for damages, ordered to dismantle their patrol system. The police faced mandates, 2 new training, re-VY said protocols, accountability measures. The gavel fell, and justice didn't roar, it sang, clear and undeniable. Marcus didn't walk alone anymore. Not because he was afraid fear had faded, replaced by something fiercer, but because others joined him. Kids from school, black and brown and white, spilled onto the sidewalks each afternoon, a quiet rebellion in sneakers and hoodies. They laughed, they talked, they claimed the streets as theirs. On a chain-link fence near Crestwood High, someone spray-painted a message in bold red, walking while free. It stayed there, untouched, a monument to what they'd won. Lena watched from her porch, a cup of tea in her hands, her eyes softer now, but still sharp. Marcus was taller, his stride surer. He didn't flinch at passing cars anymore. She didn't hover. She didn't need to. The fight wasn't over, whispers of retaliation lingered, and the system wasn't fixed, but they'd carved out space, a foothold for something better. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Marcus paused at the porch steps, looking back at her. "You didn't have to do all that, Mom," he said, voice quiet. "But I'm glad you did." Lena smiled, small but real. "I didn't do it alone, Marcus. You started it." You stood up. He nodded, then climbed the steps and sat beside her. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The silence was enough, full, strong theirs. If you were the one in this story, how would you react? Would you stand up and fight back, or accept the unreasonable pressure and control from the HOA? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this VY Deo with more people. Your small action gives us the motivation to keep bringing you more intense and engaging stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next VY Deo.